What's up, roadies? My name is Larry Milburn, and this is Roadie Free Radio, your VIP pass to meet and greet the stars behind the scenes of the music and film business. What is happening, guys? Thank you for coming down. Thank you to Lagond Music for having us, Roseanne and Charlie. Much appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, this is going to be a fun night. This is our first time doing this, and we hope there are going to be many more. And so we thought we'd take an opportunity tonight to include you guys in this conversation, as well as let these guys open
There's a
up,
microphone there for you to ask questions or insult us.
Right there. Feel free to jump in throughout the evening and ask questions as we get going.
Just know we will mock you every bit as hard as you mock us.
Absolutely. But probably not harder than we mock ourselves.
True.
Right. For those of you that don't know, my name is Larry Milburn. I host the podcast Roadie Free Radio, on which I interview folks behind the scenes of the music and film industry with a particular focus on the live touring professional right here. I started the show because I'm just fascinated by the behind-the-scenes world, how things work, why these guys and gals do what they do night after night, mile after mile, set after set, song after song. This, I think, is going to be episode 114 or so, something like that. I've been doing the show almost 3 years, and I'm never surprised by the stories that I get.
Never?
I'm never surprised.
Never say never.
Well, I'm always
Our
surprised.
work's cut out for us.
I mean, I'm never.
We'll
because
change
they're
that.
Always, they're always inspiring, and they always live up to my. They always live up to my expectations, because I think that, they're going to be inspiring, and that, one of my taglines is "No roadies, no rock and roll," and it's true, and that's true, for any genre of music that's out there touring and working. It's always the folks behind the scenes that help make it happen, and without them, there would be no show. So tonight we have two amazing gentlemen, if you could be called that, Bob.
Yeah. I'm not sure which I'm offended by more, amazing or gentleman.
And let me, for those of you guys that don't know,
Respect your elders, Larry.
If you feel like you've missed anything, by the way, after tonight's episode, I have interviews with both these guys that stretch over an hour. So head over
Each.
to roadiefreeradio.com. That's right, each. And you can find their interviews there. So here we go.
All right.
Nite Bob.
Yes, sir.
This is the legendary Nite Bob. Started in the 1970s. New York
Actually,
Dolls.
in the 60s.
In the 60s.
In the 60s. I started, actually,
Yeah,
by playing in bands.
by playing in bands.
And I rented my PA to other bands.
That's right.
And that's how this all started.
New York Dolls, Aerosmith,
Kiss,
Steely Dan,
Steely Dan.
Kiss,
A lot of bands. Emerson, Lake
a lot of
Palmer.
bands. Almost 50 years.
Stooges.
50 year. We officially
I'm
hit
on
50
the
years?
50-year kick.
50-year
this year.
kick, he
50
calls
years
it.
of this.
He's grumpier than he's ever been in his career.
It's not true. That's not true. I'm not a grumpy guy.
No,
there's
just
bass player in
the
this-
line between bullshit
Wait, this
and
is wait. I want to clear something up, right?
and we're off.
Debbie Harry's bass player, who was like an internet whiz, went online and put up this post that said I was the grumpiest sound engineer in the universe, right? And it was one of those things that no matter what you did, you could not make it go away. Every time you Googled up my name, the first thing that came up was, this guy is the grumpiest engineer on the planet Earth. And I was like, let me tell you something. There's a lot grumpier people than me in this industry. There are a lot of people who are very unhappy from the time they get up to the time they go to bed. So I just wanted to clear that up on the grumpy thing.
Should we name names?
Oh, yeah. No.
Not yet.
We could name some names, yeah. On the personnel or on the band side?
On the soundman side.
Right, on the soundman side.
Well, there's some
Thinking
thinking
of one we worked
it's a
with
very
together.
angry profession.
Yeah, I was thinking of one in particular that we worked with together recently.
Yeah, who was that? Spit it out. Mark Donald? You need to interview him.
I do. Yeah.
He's the
If
guy
you're
who likes
listening,
all
if you're
the ice
listening,
cream
Mark, we're
on the
coming to
bus.
get you.
I just want to let you guys know too, to really pull the veil off this thing. I am not, nor have I ever officially been a roadie, except for myself. I was a musician for a long time, and I carried my own guitar case. That's about as far as it got. But I'm just fascinated by these guys, and a lot of them sitting right here have become friends and buds. And a lot of times, like with Rich, I didn't actually meet Rich for the first time in person until last weekend.
Correct.
Because I do a lot of Skype calls for the show. So it's really cool to be able to go to conventions or hook up in the city and stuff and meet these guys in person. So, and Rich put this whole thing together. He's put this whole event series here at Lagond together. And
Thank you.
great dude. So,
Thanks.
first official tour making $250 a week was Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Review,
1975.
1975.
Yeah.
You've been with Todd Rundgren.
I started it. Just do the Nathan Johnson thing. I was a poor black child. No.
I knew he was going to go there.
Yeah, I had to.
You rehearsed it backstage.
Working off a
No,
script.
but it was from in the earliest age clear to me that I wasn't cut out to do much else in this world but stuff that's around music. Yeah. And it was made painfully clear to me at that same early age that it wasn't going to be on the playing side of it. So that didn't leave too many options at that point in time.
But you also,
But so-
and just jump ahead, sorry, you've been with Steel Pulse, Todd Rundgren,
Yeah,
Steely Dan,
that too, and Kiss
Right.
as well.
yeah, a lot of bands.
Bob and I have crossed paths number of times through the years, but
And
but
one of the things we talked about in your interview was the fact that you sort of figured out how to harness your organizational skills, your logistical skills, and translate that into tour management and production management.
going through my mental history of work. As I said, it was clear to me that I had to do something around music. I wasn't cut out to do anything else except possibly bag groceries, possibly. Wow. And for me, from the earliest point, I knew that I wanted to do stuff that was interesting to me, took me places I hadn't been. I insisted in the early going that I wanted to work for bands that I could stand to listen to, and I'm pretty opinionated about what I like musically, as some here in the audience can attest. And so that was kind of the road I followed, and I did so kind of as a fanboy. I mean, I started out in my earliest lead-ins was 1972 actually. When I befriended a bunch of kids from Yonkers who were Lou Reed's first solo opening band. And Lou kind of euphemistically referred to them as the Tots. But they were friends of mine, and they were my age, and they were on tour with Lou, and they were heading up to Akron, Ohio. I was going to college in Ohio, and they sent me a letter from Europe saying, this is our run, this is when we're going to be there, and come on up. So I booked myself a room at the Holiday Inn in downtown Akron near the Civic Center, and drove up there from my college, and I couldn't find them anywhere. They're not registered guests or anything. And I ran into someone who was also Todd Rundgren's tour manager, whom I kind of knew through my fandom. And I said, "Hey, Susan, where are these guys?" Oh, we fired them on Tuesday. and I came all the way up here. She said, "Well, good luck." And just then, one of Todd Rundgren's backing musicians, Moogie Klingman, came down out of the elevator, along with Ralph Schuckett, who are in Todd's band. And as I said, I was a fan. And I approached them and explained my situation. They said, "Come on in the van." So I went to the show with them as their guest, watched the whole show. It sucked. These guys were great musicians, but they had no feel at all for Lou Reed's music. They had probably never heard the Velvet Underground. And they were just, playing it by the numbers. And anyway, as the show ends, they're walking across the stage, shaking hands. Lou's already left the stage. And they're going, 14th floor Holiday Inn, 14th floor Holiday Inn, 14th. So by the time we all got back to the 14th floor on the Holiday Inn, all our rooms had been broken into. It was a party raging. And all of the things that you think were happening back then were happening then. And I went, I gotta do this. This is my future. This is my life.
Just real quick, I know some of you are band members of Rich's here, but how many folks are actually in the industry?
Yeah.
Nobody. Okay, cool. Anyone? Larry, I saw a hand go up somewhere back there. And anyone here who wants to get in the industry?
Larry.
Larry.
There's a-
I get in and I fall right back out.
Larry's a drummer.
I'll tell you that the common piece in every interview I do, and it's obviously true with these two guys, is there's the passion to be in the industry and right place, right time.
Yeah.
And it's not just right place, right time. It's also the work ethic that goes into it. And you're the guy, come with us. You're the gal, come with us. So if you guys could, you just told yours basically, right?
Well, but speaking directly to that, because you'd mentioned the Bob Dylan tour that I did in 1975, Rolling Thunder Review, and that is exactly how that came to be.
Right.
As I think I said in the interview, I was working for Studio Instrument Rentals at the time in the old 54th Street location, and it was in those days was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So someone was always on call. Someone always had a van, and I had a bunch of friends who had a band called City Lights, and they were playing at CBGB's, one of the earliest bands to do so, and I went back to SIR after the show. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's a message for me on the Codaphone, you know. It says, you got to pick up this guy and this other guy and all whatever they have at JFK. They're coming in at 6:50 in the morning. Take them anywhere they want to go. Do anything they say. Just, kiss their butts. And these were the guys who were organizing the Rolling Thunder Review. And it was a Sunday morning, and I took them to breakfast. I took them to where their offices were. And then on that Monday, they came in for a meeting at SIR. And said, we're going to start these rehearsals, and that guy who took care of us on Sunday is the only guy we want to deal with outside of management. And so all of a sudden, I'm working for Bob Dylan. And that was how that got started. So right place, right time is exactly it.
And right temperament.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, you had if you were a jerk, right, or an ass, or
on that Sunday morning, yes.
right, they would have found somebody else. What
But
about
I
you,
was a completely green rookie. I didn't know what I was doing.
But that's okay. That's my point. It's like you don't necessarily have to know in the beginning everything, right? If you're someone who's a good hang, as they say, then you at least have a pretty good shot.
In the early days,
Yeah.
It was because
Nowadays, you really do have to know what you're doing.
You were renting out your PA, but I also remember you used to show up. I think you told me at Max's, right? And
That
just
came
record.
later. No,
used to
what-
drive around with your.
No, that's Steve Remote. Steve Remote used to show up at Max's to record. What I did,
Was it you that put your thing through a window or a door at Max's?
I put
Yeah.
a speaker cabinet from that being used by Iggy and the Stooges
Yeah.
through Max's glass door because
1973, is it?
yeah, summer of '73, because the performance space was on the second floor, and there was like a steep set of stairs. And this cabinet got away from me and my surfer buddy, and it just went right through the door. Right now, it's going. My career is over, because Mickey Ruskin, who ran Max's, was standing right there, and he looked at the door and he looked at me, and I'm thinking to myself like, I'm done. Might as well, go away. And he goes, Bob, that's what insurance is for. You're not hurt, are you? And I was like, no, not at all. He goes, don't worry about it. And that was that, But I got started because one of the bands that I used my PA for them to play shows when we weren't working was a guy named Harry Popick. And he came to me at one point. He goes, I have a great gig for you. You run a rehearsal space in New York City. It's easy. He goes, bands come in. There's two floors, band on each floor. They come in, they play. They go away, you lock up, everything is great, and your band can rehearse there for free. So I was like, this is a good deal, because my band, when we did rehearse, was rehearsing in the basement of my parents' house, which was, next to the oil burner and the Christmas tree from 1958 and all this kind of shit, so. Did I say shit?
You can say it. You can say it.
Is that
The gloves are off on this one.
Is that going to
India?
keep us out of India?
Yeah, the deal is if you swear at all in a podcast.
Shit isn't a swear.
No, it's a noun. It's a thing.
Yeah, it's like
Right.
cow shit.
Yeah,
You know?
right,
That's not like saying I shit you.
right.
Oh, we're
This episode will not air in India, folks.
Yeah, I guess not anymore.
all right. Let's talk
Let's
about
go home then.
let's talk about beef. Let's talk about eating cow.
Let's get back to the fucking show.
Oh, sorry about that. All right, I digress. But so I took this gig, and my first day on the job, I dealt with the New York Dolls and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and I realized within an hour that I was really in the deep end of the pool. But Harry helped me out and got me going, and next thing you know, I met like hundreds of people in the music industry, because this predates studio instrument rentals, and it was the only place in New York where a professional band could rehearse. And I dealt with everybody from Peter Frampton to Genesis to the New York Dolls to Stories to Mahavishnu Orchestra to everybody. I met a lot of people in a really short period of time, and I knew a lot about gear, just because both of my parents were involved in electronics. My mother worked for RCA. My father worked for General Precision, which is like a Skunk Works missile guidance system company that nobody really knows about. But so there were always oscillators and tubes and you know, fantastic tube stereos in my house and stuff like that. But I still wanted to be a guitar player. But within a month, I realized that the water was way deeper than I ever thought it was. You know, it's like, especially when someone, you know, like you go, like you're standing next to John McLaughlin, right, and he's playing like 200 notes per minute, you know, and you're going like, I can't play like that. I don't want to play like that. You know, it's like, how can I compete against these guys? So you go upstairs, listen to New York Dolls, and you go, I can play better than them. Maybe there's hope, you know, but I can't look like them. That's when you begin to realize it's like it's half the talent, and the other half is selling yourself.
Jeez.
As more. I mean, like there's a lot of people who can play, but there's not a lot of people who can put it over to make you believe.
And that's exactly why I followed the path I followed, because I had neither of those attributes.
What can you do?
Let me ask you guys this. As we sit here in 2018 with the internet, if you were starting now as a musician, right, let's go back to just before you sort of made the leap, both of you, into the behind-the-scenes world.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think it would be different if you had the internet at your disposal?
Well, first of all, I mean, the process of organizing a tour. And then, I mean, I used to have different calling cards for telephone, for payphones. I mean, a bus stop on the road while the bus is fueling up, which takes roughly a half hour, 40 minutes. And everybody usually uses that time to go to the bathroom, as we discussed earlier. No number one on the no number two in the bathroom, right?
Number one, number two, whatever.
in a bus. But in any case, I would be at the phone booth, you know, standing out there in the freezing cold, dialing the 19 numbers you had to dial to put in your code for Sprint or MCI or AT&T or whatever phone company actually you could use at that particular phone booth.
These people are all looking at you going, what the hell is this guy talking about? Phone card?
And phone on my shoulder, pad here, writing down notes and things, and then getting back and then trying to put it into yet another notated form that I can make copies of to share with people. I mean, obviously, we now have, Master Tour for those who like that convenience, and, a dozen other ways to input and share data.
But as a
with people.
musician, if you were starting today as a musician, like if you were that kid,
I never
way
considered
back.
myself a musician. I can't answer.
You
that.
bowed out. You bowed out full. So what about you?
I don't know. I think it's very different. I mean, like the whole
Thank you,
the filtering process is different. I mean, it's wide open. I mean, you can, if you're in a band or a solo performer or whatever, the internet allows you to reach millions of people, right? The problem is that there's millions of people posting music,
Right.
and there's no filter. It used to be that in order to make a record, you had to be at a certain level of proficiency
Yeah.
of either performing or songwriting or something, and you didn't get to make a record until you got to that level. Nowadays, anybody in this room could buy some gear for maybe $1,000 and make records at home. You buy a good laptop, you get GarageBand, you got with samples and drum loops and all this kind of stuff. You can make your own record, right? And you can put it on Facebook. You can, if you try hard enough, you could actually get it on iTunes, right? And then, but it's getting people to pay attention, because right now, recorded music is at its lowest value to an audience. They don't care. They don't want to pay for it, right? Streaming is the big thing. They don't want to own it. They don't want to pay for it. They want to listen to it when they feel like it. They want the one song. The one song. The album is a dead issue right now. Nobody buys albums. Nobody. So all of a sudden we're in a singles mentality, right? And
Back to the 50s.
Back to the 50s, back to the 40s, actually,
Yeah,
where a record was basically something for you to listen to until the band came around again. Yeah. So it's pretty difficult, and it's like, and especially even playing out is difficult now, because nobody wants to pay you, right, to play, right? And like the audience doesn't care, because all they think is that I can't talk to this girl because there's some band playing some stupid
That hasn't
song.
changed.
I mean, the problem is that if it was a good band, I mean, if a promoter had to pay these growing young bands, right, he'd be a little more picky about what plays. Now it's like people are just dying to convince 15 of their friends to come pay $6 to see them, so the club will have them come back, and that doesn't, really mean, if you got that many friends, you can get a fake career going. There's plenty of bands in New York that have done that, that like they make their gigs an event and the music is secondary. It becomes basically like, a meat rack to meet other people, and it's like the music is secondary. Where do you go from there, right?
On tour.
And where do you get the money to do that?
You just said it. We don't need money anymore.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Well, then this is a good jumping off point to the question that we talked to in the back.
Okay.
Right.
We were in the back?
We were in the back. Okay. We were in the back of the bus back there.
The back.
Oh,
I
I
thought this
remember.
was the back of the bus.
Oh, right.
Go ahead.
I don't know which way's front. Well, when someone asks you now, right?
Hey, how come you got reverb and I don't?
Because I'm the fucking host.
Oh. Now we're not getting played in Indonesia. You said the F word.
I did.
You said poop.
Because I'm the pooping host? No. All right.
I can't believe I'm the only one who hasn't said a word on it yet.
Soon come.
If someone asks you today, right, I want to get in the music industry.
Don't do it.
I used to teach at NYU, and I would bring people in like Patrick Woodruff, the Rolling Stones lighting designer, who he would start his lecture. He started his lectures with, "Why do any of you want to do this for a living?" Yeah. It's like, I mean, and I think the point is, the point that Bob's making. I mean, when you asked that question backstage, I jokingly said, "On your knees is how you get in this industry." But the reality is, nowadays you got to be one of those 15 people that your friend's band knows, that pays the $6 to go see them, and then helps out, and then keep hoping that they actually continue from there and can grow from there. There really aren't a whole lot of avenues to get in outside of technical training,
right?
Full Sail and things like
right.
that. I mean, Full Sail was a laughing stock amongst professional touring personnel for a long time. But the reality is they're teaching today a technology that's required.
Right.
That, we've all learned those skills by doing it Bob almost 50 years, me 45 years, but young kids today have to enter with the same skills that we've acquired through hard work and training.
In terms of some of those skills, and I don't know how many of you know this or if this would be interesting, but would you like to hear what an average day on the road looks like, sounds like? Sure. Yeah? All right. Okay. So we'll do it from two perspectives, all right? We'll take it from tour manager and front of house engineer. We'll start with Bob, because that'll be quite colorful.
Yes. Bob's average day on the road doesn't start till like 1 PM.
That's not true. Nowadays, you just can't be a standalone engineer. you usually always have to have a second cap to wear, right? Most of the time I go out, I'm like either the production manager / sound engineer, or in a lot of cases, I'm the tour manager / sound engineer.
Calling me for advice every have a chance he gets.
I was going like, this guy's trying to, never mind, we won't go there. But
Like our mutual friend Drew Consalvo,
Yeah.
right,
right with Magpie Salute.
right, because that's the way it is. Because
Front of
you know,
house, production management and tour management.
well,
That also
here's
goes
the
back-
thing.
That goes back to the issue of what people can afford anymore.
Well, what it is? Well, let's talk about money for a second here, right? Now it used to be that you made your money from selling records, and your touring thing was a loss leader to sell the records,
records.
right? Nobody buys records anymore. Oh, I do, but I mean, like, you know, a very small percentage, right? So now it's all about income from live performance, right? So then as soon as you get to, that's your main way to make money, people start to go to the lowest, you know, let's keep our costs down as low as possible, right? So the cheapest, they want the cheapest stuff they can get. The cheapest bus, the cheapest flights, the cheapest crew, blah, 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 right? So all of a sudden, I mean, the two-hat thing becomes like, you can be the tour manager and you can be the sound engineer, you know, and I can do both. I'm telling you, being the sound engineer is the best part of your day, right? And it's the tour management thing, you're on the phone all the time. You're talking to promoters, you're talking to management, you're talking to your band members who are, you know, crying, I'm unhappy, you know, it's like my bunk's too small. And they go like, I'm going to stab him while he's asleep. Yeah. I'm going to put... And I'm going to put, what's that stuff that clears your eyes?
Visine?
A drop of Visine in somebody's drink will give you diarrhea of a sort you've never experienced before in your life, right? The other good one is itching powder in your bunk.
Who's ready to sign up to go on the road?
Don't piss me off, all right?
He's not grumpy.
Right, yeah, right.
No, I didn't. No, I'm not grumpy. I'm just full of vengeance and anger.
All right.
Yes, Larry.
Can we hear about the incident with you and Mr. Tyler?
Would you- okay. Guys, we're happy
we're
to
not gonna
entertain
go there,
questions, but because this is also being recorded, if you want to ask, please use the microphone.
I really
Yeah,
shouldn't have told
definitely
that Visine story.
in the middle there.
All right, wait, so for those of you who
That was
don't
a
know,
joke.
For those of you who don't know, so front of house engineer, right? They're the guys or gals out in the front of the house mixing sound for the show. Tour manager, behind the scenes, doing all the logistics of getting a tour city to city, state to state, all that kind of stuff. Production manager.
Production manager also runs the day-to-day operation of the show at the venue. And
It's actually an easy job
if you do it right.
if you have good vendors.
Yeah. No, I mean, I used to say, I've worn a lot of hats in my 45 years, not just a tour manager, not just a backline guy. I've been a production manager on tour. I've also been a promoter, rep, and production manager for venues. And the one thing I always say is the show day is the easiest day of that week if I've done my job right. True. And that it means I've advanced the show. I've spoken to people at the right time, knew exactly what was coming. I had the right amount of crew guys. I had catering ready. If I had all that stuff, I did all that work in the days and the weeks leading up to that show. That show day is a matter of sitting in my office playing solitaire and fielding questions and, waiting for the first guy to come along with a joint.
So wait, so getting back, so show day, what happens? What's a typical day look like?
We run for the hills. What do you mean?
Well, no. I mean, it depends on the level of the band. You know, suppose you're on a fly date, right? Which means you're getting your band out of a hotel, to an airport, getting their luggage or whatever, getting them onto the plane, right? Getting to point B, getting transportation. Either get rid of them. You take them to the hotel, dump them there, take your crew people, you go to the venue. We're talking now about noon, right? You get there.
Based around a 6 a.m. flight.
Yeah, 6 a.m. flight,
And
waiting
assuming
around, a
that
lot of
nobody
waiting
missed it.
around. And then you go to the venue and you double check things that the dressing rooms are just like he sent you pictures of, and that they're, the catering stuff is all together, the PA and lights, all that stuff, the rental backline is all as it should be.
It's also important just in terms of information flow to walk around the place and know the physical layout of a venue if it's the first time you've been there, so that when you come back later with the band, you
know
can
where
lead them,
things
you know
are.
where they're going. Because when
Where
you
the
walk
bathroom
in,
is.
nothing worse than having a band following you and you don't have a clue where you're going. You walk into this building, okay, anybody know where the dressing rooms are?
Yeah, really.
And the guy in the back's going, "Where's catering?" You know. Oh, usually the drummer.
It's like if your band sound checks, they come in, they get angry, they go to the dressing room, they sulk, right? Because in a sound check, you're really asking a band to come into an alien environment and say, "What don't you like?" So it really becomes. I try never to have band sound checks anymore. I much prefer that my backline people do it, because they know over a period of time what these guys need. And I'll tell you, it's much nicer to have the band come in, they go to their nice little dressing room, they have a bottle of Fiji water or, some piece of fruit, and they walk out on stage and the people go, "Ah." All of a sudden the monitors don't matter. Nothing matters. They're like going, "They love me." They play their show. They finish their show. They go back to the dressing room. They have another bottle of Fiji water, maybe some more fruit, maybe a pizza.
Can I work for that band?
They do exist. They do exist.
I would love to work for that band, because
They're out there.
You mentioned that I worked for Steel Pulse for 20. I've been with them for 21 years and still part of that family. And we don't do sound checks with Steel Pulse. We do matinees. That band will get on a stage. If our sound check is at 4 o'clock, they'll get on the stage at 4 o'clock, and they'll stand around on the stage until the crew are actually ready, which is usually 5 o'clock. Then they'll go through things till about 5:30, and then the leader of the band, David Hines, will come in about 5:30 because now he thinks everybody's probably ready for him, and then he'll run them through every song that he heard even the slightest misnote or wrong beat 3 days ago. And he'll run them through that song 8 times until it's now 7:30, and you're going, doors are in 30 minutes. And we got to get going, guys. And they say, "I got you, man. I got you, man." So,
There's
doors are in
medication
15
for
minutes, man.
that.
We got to get you out of here. I say, "I got you, man. I got you, man." So finally, the bass player, Amlak Tafarai, will walk off the stage and just go, "I'm done." He can bloody well fire me. It's like, great, whatever. And then, so now he get off the stage, and the doors are about to open, and David will go to me, "I need to go back to the hotel. I need to take a nap before we play." And okay, where's the runner? Oh, he's out getting the pizza for the crew. It's like, all right, can you get me a cab? Well, there's only 2 cabs in this town, and I think both are busy. Where's the hotel? Is there a hotel
About
closer?
Uber. There's only one Uber.
Herding
Yeah,
cats.
Uber, right. It is. But in any case, I'll get him back to the hotel. He'll have 20 minutes to lie down.
But he got his 20
He
minutes.
got his 20 minutes in, and it took me 40 minutes to get him out of the room.
He wins.
And I'm going like, all the time. As a tour manager, I'm going, I've got 17 other things I should be doing, but I'm busy taking care of this one person. And I have to, because he's the one who's technically signing the checks. So, yeah, I'm
that's
taking care of him.
bad.
So can I work for your band, Bob?
Absolutely. Like I said to Larry earlier, and to you too, I go, the window of acceptability shrinks every day for me for what I'm willing to put up with. I think an important point is, that's a basic kind of day, but that day repeats over and over and over again, whether you're doing fly dates. If you have a bus, it's actually worse because everybody's smashed together in this submarine, right, for hours, you know what I mean? And they fight over, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too hot, it's too cold, It's like people get up in the middle of the night and turn the air conditioning off, and all of a sudden you're sweating to death in your bunk, right? Because someone, it's like, that's the reason you have a quilt in there.
Right. And make no mistake, when you have a dozen people living in a tin can, bacteria grows. And it grows faster and more virulent when it's warm.
Yeah.
So keeping a bus cold, even in the wintertime, is really necessary for sustaining health.
It's truth. Absolutely true.
And it's a battle, as Bob said, it's a battle we all endure on the road.
So over a period of like 2 or 3 months, the littlest things become big deals, right? It could be as easy as the smell of socks.
Or it
Right.
it can be something seemingly benign, like the guy in the bunk above me always puts his suitcase on my bunk while he's trying to get something out of it. And his suitcase has all this crap on it and whatever, and I end up getting into my bunk and it's like full of dirt.
Yeah.
Invariably, there's little things that you shrug off on any given day. After 6 weeks, you want to kill somebody.
It's true.
So how do you guys stay sane out there?
You don't.
You don't know.
Plain and simple, you don't. I mean, there was
must
there was
find
an
ways
online
throughout the
thread.
day.
There was an online thread a couple of weeks ago, one of the touring sites about what do you do when you first come off the road. I mean, you're sometimes bordering on suicidal, and it's like how do you get through that time? And you really got to be kind to yourself. You got to forgive yourself everything. You got to let yourself do whatever it is you need. When I used to tour more heavily than I do today, I'd come off the road, and somewhere 10 days, if I'm lucky, 3 weeks if it's been really grueling, I wake up one morning, I go, oh, I'm back. All of a sudden, I feel like me again, and I didn't even necessarily know I didn't feel like me in all that time. But eventually, the amount of rest you needed catches up with you. The things, the routines of your normal day-to-day life, the things you like to do, the things you care about, the people you know and love, begin to, fall back into place. Yeah. I mean, you come off touring and you're a completely different person, for a whole variety of reasons, some of which we've gone into. But it's not something that any of us take lightly, to be honest. Yeah.
And you've been able to maintain a family through most of this, yeah?
Well, that's when I started weaning myself away from touring somewhat. And that was one of the reasons I stayed with Steel Pulse as long as I did, is because they're my family. And it was okay for my wife to come out or my son to come out and be a part of that so that I could be dad while I'm also making a living.
How did that affect you? How did them giving you that responsibility or that ability to do that, how did that affect you?
It was enormous.
work?
It was enormous. I mean, look, it's not just me and Steel Pulse. Bob and any band he works for, Drew and any band he works for, anybody who knows what we do, whatever band they work for, you're a family. From day one to the final day, you share intimacies and personal experiences that it's very much like being in an army troop. You're a part of something that only those people understand. Mm-hmm. So a willingness to let what is essentially an outsider in, a girlfriend, a wife, is an enormous boon, because if you're involved with somebody who does what we do, you already understand some of what our lives are like. So those people, my wife specifically, would come out and lend a hand. Hey, how can I help you? What can I get? What do you need? My son, as he grew up, would come on the road and go into the venue with the crew and start laying out cables and stuff like that and learning how to put a PA together. Fortunately, he's more talented musically than I was, so he's got a better future. But it's really true. This sense of alienation is a very real experience for all of us on the road.
You live in a bubble, like it's Groundhog Day. It's the same day over and over again. And I think what Rich said was really important, that there's a lot of shared experiences, right? Not unlike like guys who fought together in Vietnam or the Second World War or Korea or something like that, where there was like some shared horror show. Being in war and death, and maybe your bus is like in the side of the road in a snowbank somewhere. You got no power, and you're sitting there in the dark, and all 5 of you, all 10 of you are going like, "We're gonna die."
You guys know when we swing over to this side of the room, it goes from like Steel Pulse and the Matinee to like Death and Destruction with Bob.
It's always about death and destruction.
Man.
You know, you're screaming around in a bus, right? With some guy, right, who's driving your bus, right, through ice and snow, through, going from Seattle to Portland, right? Next thing you know, you're on the side of the road going like, we've got no power.
Yeah.
We've got no heat.
I can tell.
But we have cell phones. We have internet. We will survive one way or another. Because we'll set this bus on fire if we have to.
I remember we had with Steel Pulse as well. We had a bunch of shows, winter shows in Colorado. This whole run of dates, and because it's winter in Colorado, we couldn't take the bus, all the way up through the mountains. Can't go through any of the passes and stuff. So we thought the more expedient thing to do was to get vans and drive. And
That was a good move.
now, those here in the audience know me, but people listening to this podcast don't. I was a New York City cab driver in the early 70s before I was on tour. So I still drive that way. And snow, not a problem. Rain, not a problem. Sleet, not a problem. So I'm going, Interstate 70 from Denver, like to Aspen. You're going to go to Glenwood Springs and come back, or up to Breckenridge or Copper Mountain, and I'm just hauling ass 80 miles an hour, on this snow-covered interstate, and the guys in the van with me are just like going, "We're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die," and I'm like in complete control, calmly just going, I'm just. The only thing different from my life at that point was I didn't have to flip a meter, But I was just going, cars, trucks, buses, didn't matter at all, and I got them there safely, and they all come out. I've never seen white or black people in my life than the guys getting out of that van.
You guys,
and I'm completely
You
like,
will not
wow,
host
what's
the
wrong?
Oscars.
What's the problem?
you will not host the Oscars. Oh my God! If you guys could, let's go back a little bit because you both started roughly around the same time. Paint a picture for us of 69, early 70s New York, and what the music scene was like here.
There was none. There was nowhere. There were a handful of clubs.
Gloom.
There were a handful of clubs. You could go to the Bitter End. You could go to Cafe A Go Go, right? Maybe the Garrick Theater if you were good enough. You had the Steep Pulse scene where bands would play, Unganos, right? Where they would go and play the Fillmore on the weekend, and then play 4 nights like a Steep Pulse scene, which is about the size of the space we're in now.
Yeah.
Because bands didn't make a lot of money, and every day off, you're paying for a hotel. Granted, things were not, you could get a decent hotel for $35.
Well, back then you had the Albert, you had the Chelsea.
Well, yeah, even higher up, you could still get when I was working for the Stooges in the early 70s, right, I stayed at a Hilton, and I have the bill, and it was $35 for a room at the Hilton. Right.
A bucket of ice is
With a
$35
pool. With a pool. Yeah. You pay $35 for a pillow these days. We won't get into what happened in hotels.
Oh, why not? Come on.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you.
You're supposed to tell stories.
The first time I wrecked a room, right, was about 3 months into a tour with a British band that we flew every day. The reason we flew is they sold. You're gonna love this part. The band sold an insane amount of records in India.
This is Emerson,
Right.
Lake and Palmer he's talking
They
about.
gave you vouchers, right?
Well, yeah, what it was is
show.
that they, but at the time, in 70, 71, you couldn't take that money out of India. So what they would do, the band's management would buy plane tickets on Air India. And at that time, if you had a plane ticket, it would work on any airline.
Right. You could
Right,
go
so
up to,
we-
just to explain for people who don't remember that era.
They don't do that no more.
No. You could go up to any counter of any major carrier, and they had a uniform ticket agreement amongst all the major carriers. So if I presented a valid ticket from Air India, it was cash
Yeah.
to them. So they would convert the ticket over to whatever you needed to do. You know.
So after a couple of months of flying every day, you start to get a little rough around the edges, you know. And so I was in Eugene, Oregon, and we had a party in my room, and there was something going on in the bathroom, and I wanted to know what was going on in my bathroom. So I just threw myself against the door, and the door splintered into nothing, right? So being a good,
Not a Hilton.
you know, not a Hilton, right? So being the next morning, I went down to the front desk and I said, like, I had an accident in your room and I broke the door to the bathroom. And the guy looks at me and he goes, that'll be $20. And I was like, this is okay. You know? Here's the $20. Don't tell that English guy, okay? Do me here's 10 for you. Don't tell the little English guy, all right? Because he'll be really mad. But that's all gone. You know, I mean, it really came down to things were cheap, you know, back then. You could mess something up. And then it just got out of hand. You know, I mean, I blame the English bands. They were big on hotel destruction. Right.
I blame
and
drugs.
then American bands followed suit, you know, and then like as other bands, like as the 80s bands wanted to live like the 70s bands, so they were throwing TVs out the window, but they were paying a whole lot more money.
I remember throwing a TV out with Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah, it did happen.
It was
TVs
during the
weren't that
Tonight Show.
expensive.
It was during the Tonight Show, and we wanted to see Johnny Carson go through a screaming cathode ray death. So we had every extension cord we could find.
Oh, you
hooked up to
wanted
the TV.
it on.
We had the TV on, and we carried it to the window and dropped it out so it was upright so we could see Johnny on the screen as it just exploded.
Wow. now it's just like, you know, funny story. I was doing a show in Berlin, right, and they were filming the band, right, and they said, "Wait, we want to get that. You know, you're like a very retro '70s band. Let's go and like let's throw a TV out the window of the hotel, right? We'll pay for it. Don't worry about it, right?" So the band goes to the room, right? Number one, the window doesn't open. It's just this little.
It did that
slot,
night.
You know, no, it didn't. You know, it was like, and the TV screen was built into the wall. Right? You know what I mean? It was actually built into, you
Right, I
probably
remember
seen
some of
these,
those.
into a mirror. You know, you go, I have a remote. Where's the TV? Push on button. All of a sudden, this screen appears. You know, and like, oh, I guess we're not going to. You turn to the German film crew and go, you picked this hotel. which the main color was pink. Everything was pink. I walked into my room and said, this room is completely pink. I went downstairs and I go like, I think there's been a mistake. My room is all pink. And these guys were like right out of craft work or something. They were like, of course it's pink.
Of course.
You are in Berlin. We are cutting edge here. This is true. Absolutely true.
Bob, you don't know how to tell a lie.
Exactly.
Now, wait a minute. What do you say?
You're like Cassandra when it comes to this, you know, the mythical Cassandra. You cannot tell an untruth when you tell stories.
I can, but it's hard to tell what's real and what's not. You know, I mean, so much weird stuff has happened. You know, I mean, like in the course of 50 years, you know, I mean, you're dealing with really lunatics. You know, I mean, very few of them are really sensible people in any way, shape, or form. You know, I mean, and I mean that in the nicest way. I mean, like to be a performer, you have to have some kind of screw loose. You know, it's your way of communicating with people. You know, so after a while, I feel for them. You know, I mean, I go, I can't do that anymore. Yeah. You know, I mean, so you want them to be able to do that because it's a special thing. Yeah. You know, when you got someone who can communicate to 100 people, 1,000 people, or 20,000 people, and it's in a live thing. Right. You know, to keep the attention of 20,000 people is a powerful thing. I know that like I was doing this show, I was doing Mix and Kiss at the time, and we're playing Donington, right? And there was 100,000 people at this, you know, event. Right, and I was there checking some gear, and I walked up to the microphone, and I said, "Stand up." You get 100,000 people to stand up. You know, you go,
Well, you say it like that.
wow. Look at that. Imagine if I said, stand on your head. You know, but it's a feeling of power. And I got to tell you that a lot of, you know, especially when they're playing big places, people don't play big places the way they used to. Used to be every band could sell 20,000 seats. The culture is completely different now.
Yeah.
Right? Music is disposable. It's just, you know, something you go put to Spotify to put on when you're doing something else, you know. But when it was a culture, when it meant something to, you know, you wanted to be at a show with people who liked the same kind of music you liked and to share an experience together. Now we're all segmented now, you know.
But
Getting
also
people out of the house is really difficult.
Also, they could do that because the caliber of bands that would play together on bills.
Oh, I don't know.
with like
I blame the audience. I really do.
Well,
you know.
But I think, you know, Blue Oyster Cult, I worked for them in 1976. We had
great
Don't Fear
band.
the Reaper as a big hit. And we're out on the road, and our opening acts are Rush and Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. I mean, what kid at that age
now it's
wouldn't
all
have gone
about
to
the
those
money.
shows?
You know, it's all about the money now. You know, you don't want to have a good band open for you
Right.
because you want to look good.
Right.
You know,
and
I mean,
that's actually
'cause
goes to another point that, you know, we've kind of touched on. Headline acts, you know, because live touring is their revenue stream, don't want to spend on support acts.
No, they want you to pay to be on their tour.
Right. So there's pay to play for
Which
one
has
thing.
been happening for a long time. It's not a new
Right.
thing.
But that
The
was
British bands
but
were
it
like
was-
that. The
it was a-
buy-on was always there.
It was a club level thing until the last 15 years or so.
No.
You know, no. All right.
It's
Well,
always been a buy-on.
well, that's true. Yeah, but then in those days you had the record company offering tour support, and that was the way.
You know what it was?
The
I mean,
marketing
I was-
department was
I
going to
on a
help with the
Van Halen
advertising of the
tour.
tour.
I was on
and
a
pushing
Van
all that.
Halen tour 10 years ago. 10 years? Yeah, 2004, 14 years ago, right? To get on
That's 10
that
years
tour,
ago.
you had to pay $50,000 to do a month's worth of shows.
Yeah.
50 grand, right? This is a band that's selling, you know, that's making like easily anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million a show, right? But in order for the honor to be abused by the Van Halen audience, you had to, because who didn't want to hear anything but Van Halen?
But my
So
point
it was kind of a moot point. You're spending a lot of money and getting no payback out of it.
right. But my point was that in years gone by, there were higher caliber acts, more, you know, in supporting roles.
I think there's plenty of high caliber acts. I think the audience doesn't give a fuck.
That could well be.
Really, you know what I mean? It's like they don't. It's not part of the culture like it was when we were growing up. When
Well,
most of
you know,
these
it was-
people were growing up.
In a recent interview, I was talking about that with someone that, you know, back then, 60s, early 70s, whatnot, these were happenings. These things.
It also didn't cost $200 to go see a show either.
Right. There's that.
You know, I mean, that's a big.
Right.
I paid $5 to see three bands in 1970, right? And if I wasn't sure about them, I could sit in the balcony for $250. You know, and now it's like, you know, you're a father. You know, your son come to you and ask for $300 to see some band you never heard of. Would you give him the money?
Well,
Talk about putting him on the spot.
But yeah,
With his son
I was
sitting
saying,
out there.
My son actually went to see a band in Brooklyn at Music Hall of Williamsburg on Halloween.
It didn't cost
It was a
$250.
$20 ticket.
Yeah,
I was
okay,
I was happy to buy him a ticket.
I'm sure you were.
He has
That's a-
not asked me to buy him a ticket to see the
Fucking
Rolling
bargain,
Stones
$20
this summer
Right.
for $400 a ticket.
Is that what
And
they're
don't
going
even
for?
think about it.
Is that what they're going for right now?
I think so. That's what it is now.
You're going to be mowing a lawn for a year. No, seriously, think about it. You used to be able to go see, you know, a lot of bands. And, you know, it's like, you know, your parents would give you $20 to get rid of you. You know, I mean, it's like, oh, go see a band. You know, let's get out of the house, right? You know,
So
you and your
guys
mother.
can talk about what's behind that. What's behind a $400?
Greed.
Greed. Yeah.
Greed.
I mean,
And you know what? Wait, I want to say one thing
Okay,
about
no,
this.
let Bob talk.
Besides the greed thing, you know, if the audience didn't pay it, it wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Right? So every time you buy a ticket for over, you know, say $70 or something like that, you're encouraging the next smaller band to go, well, if they'll pay 70, they'll pay 150 next time for the same basic show.
In fairness, you know, bands like the Stones carry an enormous production that, you know, spares no expense. It doesn't justify it, but it does spend a good chunk of what they're taking in too. You know, I mean, the Rolling Stones. I saw the Rolling Stones in
They have a
1965.
lot of money already. How much money do they need?
We're not
How much money
we're not
do they need?
arguing that.
You
I'm
know,
just
it's
saying.
like, I'm down to my last 20 million. Let's make the ticket $600.
Right?
But I saw the Rolling Stones in 1965 at the Academy of Music. 5 guys on a stage, you know, a 6th guy behind the amps, Ian Stewart, you know, and then, you know, just small amps, and you know, and that was it. And I paid $5, $6, you know, if it was the ticket. My brother and I went, and it's like they're just as good now, maybe, you know, maybe better because they've been playing longer, and they don't need any more than that.
Right.
But they give you more than that. It doesn't justify the cost,
Right.
but it does explain some of it.
And they're traveling, like you said, with a lot more than those 5 guys now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you go see a U2 show, right, it's a massive set thing.
Yep.
2 of them, because
Yeah.
they got to relay that across
Now,
the country.
there's, you know, we could
You're paying
spend
for
we
that.
could spend a lot more time than we have discussing the use of technology in these shows.
Sure.
You know, and how much, you know, how much expensive stuff goes into it. See, I still didn't say the word shit.
You just did.
But it doesn't. It doesn't change the fact that you're paying hand over fist for something that you should just simply be enjoying and appreciating for its gut value.
Yes, but do you think that the audience now expects a certain level, and so therefore the artist?
Well, I think that's the contract that they've sort of signed in blood by paying down that much money.
Yeah.
You know, and as Bob said, if the audience didn't pay it, these bands wouldn't do it. So yeah, you know.
I mean, really, I think, you know, you guys, like, you remember a time not so long ago when you used to go to Madison Square Garden like a couple of times a month to see a band? Yes or no? No? Used to be you go there all the time. It was $20 to see a show in an arena. You know, it's like, I haven't been to Madison Square Garden in well over a year. And I like going to shows. I really do. I actually buy tickets now and then. I don't buy $400 tickets because I know how to get around that. I go in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I eat in catering. Then I see the show and I leave. You know, and we go sit out front of house.
I can't do that as much anymore because I have my wife and son. It's like
I
you and I go to a show. Yeah,
I
we
don't
do
have a
exactly
wife
that.
and son, so it makes it much easier for me. You know, and to me, it's sort of like, you know, I like to know what, you know, to see what's going on technologically. You know, and a lot of times, man, it's like people singing the tracks and shit like that, singing and dancing and running around like, you know, it's like it's like the circus, you know, and it's just I'm going like. In a way, you're killing off your audience. You know, you're not allowing people to experience music at a young age, for one. You know, because same thing. Who's got nowadays? Who's got $100 to give your kid to go see some band?
Well, that also brings us to an argument. You kind of touched on something that with bands, perfection seems to be the new norm. Pro Tools, isolation cabinets for your guitars and stuff like that. Where
That's a technical thing.
right, but I'm saying when we were first starting out, a band went in the studio and made a record. Then they went into rehearsal and spent time arranging those songs for live performance because you couldn't recreate what they did in the studio. And that gave them an edge in performance that was really considerable. You know, when I saw the Stones in '69 at Madison Square Garden for $750, I think was the ticket price. You know, with Ike and Tina Turner opening and Janis Joplin. You know, I mean, they came out and the arrangements of those songs were alive. They were vibrant. They were in the moment. And it wasn't just because these kids were younger. It was because they were playing together as a band.
Right.
They weren't recreating something with how you got the triggers for that track over there. He's got the samples, you know, on the keyboards over here. We got 7 backing vocalists who make us sound like the Rolling Stones always sound.
Right.
You know, it was a visceral experience.
Yeah.
You know, and it's part of what made me want to get into that business. I had to be a part of that somehow.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't going to be playing, I was darn well going to find a way to do it. You know.
I think I asked both you guys this in the interview because I ask everybody. So what still inspires you now?
Music. I mean, it's still the same.
You still get a kick out of
I
it.
still, when I used to mix sound, I like Bob, I was also a sound man. I kind of bowed out in the digital age. But when I was a sound man, I stood there at the mixing board and I felt like I was one of those guys on the stage because I knew full well what I was doing was exactly what the audience was hearing. What they were experiencing was a direct result of my effort. Mm-hmm. And that made me feel alive and a part of the band in ways that I don't even think being a player would have made me feel.
Yep.
I could tell for myself I was doing a good job by how I was dancing at the board. If I was in it, if I was feeling it, if I was moving in time, if I was hearing it, and it was filling me with that energy,
Yeah.
it was a good night.
Bob, what still gets you inspired? Why
Good
do you get
show.
out of bed to do this?
Because there's always the chance that you're gonna have a performance that will just blow you out of the park.
Still the music.
And it's still the music, and it's like I tend to go for the ones who are like the running, and the chance of going off the rails is like the most exciting part, where you don't know what's going to happen. The same way, like these big shows nowadays, I'm not going to name any names, that's a different thing. It's a show.
Yeah.
It's not a music gig, it's like Disney on Ice. It is.
He's right. He's right.
Like Ariana Grande can sing. She's a real singer, and she's got some cool songs and all that. And who doesn't really need all this other stuff, but it's a show, right? I tend to like it when you go to the down and dirty 1,000 to 2,000, venues where you can pack some people in there, and it's hardcore people who love a band. Yeah. For whatever reason, it's almost like it's a shared experience thing, that you can. There are still bands that kick ass, young bands that kick ass. I fight with my friends about Greta Van Fleet.
I was just thinking that was where
all
we were
the
going.
time, right? Because to me, they're like it's like this could be like the saving grace of music. He got 3 brothers from rural Michigan, right, making Led Zeppelin style music. All my friends hate them, right? Last time I was in a situation like that was with the New York Dolls. I'd bring my friends to see them, and they'd all go, "You're out of your mind. This band is horrible," right? Now who's talking? And then I see these same people 30 years later saying like, "You gotta get me into this show. I've gotta see the Dolls before they die." Okay, because like they sound like Led Zeppelin, So I would bring up this review of the first Led Zeppelin record in Rolling Stone, where they say they're terrible and they're derivative and they're just a bunch of yahoos from the Midlands, that this Svengali Jimmy Page session guy is just like copying Jeff Beck, It's like they're terrible, 1 star, right? Bang, zoom, right? But rock show. I think there'll always be rock shows. I really do. You go through these periods. If you look at it historically, the crappier it gets, it usually means something else. There's going to pendulum swing the other way. Right. It's like when hair metal became like really embarrassing. It's like, are you going to be able to show the kids a picture of yourself looking like Farrah Fawcett like 20 years from now? Try explaining that to your son. And then all of a sudden you have like a reaction. It's like, look at the Beatles. The Beatles are a reaction to, like some crappy ass, white guy pop music, Yeah. Bobby, not that he's bad, what I'm saying?
He's bad.
It gets to, come on. I didn't want to single him out,
No,
but
I know what you're saying.
That when things get really kind of, too much to one side of, there's always like some kind of opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that's what gets me through the day. That like something it's like as bad as it gets. There's some kid in a garage somewhere who wants to make some horrible music, and his parents are screaming, "Will you stop, please?" Yeah. Nice. There was a point in the '80s where parents were coming to me and going like, "I used to complain when he listened to Slayer." Now he's listening to hip hop, and I'm really afraid that I've not done my job as a parent. That like, what can I do?
Right.
We've got
Too far gone.
Yeah, I was just going to say, thank you. We've got about 20 minutes left, and I wanted to open it up for some questions.
There's a microphone right there in the middle. And,
I've got a question. Hi there. So my question is about women. It's really, they're sort of two different things to ask about. I guess the first question really has to do with how women are treated on the road, how they're thought of. And I realize that we're talking about two different things, right? We're talking, on the one hand, about people moving into the business who are women and how they're treated. Right. And I've heard some stories about them talking about that. When I was in rock and roll, it was a pretty misogynistic place, let's just put it that way. But there are always women on the road in various capacities. And, you know, the word groupie is like a bad word, but these women
no, it's not.
kind of, oh, thank you for saying that. No, really.
Yeah,
thank you for saying that. And I'd actually like to hear some positive words about those women, because I think without them, there probably would be no rock and roll.
Okay.
So I'd really like to hear that. And then just about how that has evolved or not, or, you know.
Okay, well, if I can go first on that.
Go ahead.
You know, yeah, in the early going, you know, it was a guys' club, you know, and there were very, very few women who were working in the business. You had the occasional performer, the Janis Joplin, the Tina Turners, but, you know, the roles for women were, you know, cosmetic, hair and makeup, wardrobe, things of that nature. And yeah, there was the groupie thing, but the groupie thing is a kind of a funny sort of world, because it's a symbiotic situation, I think. In many respects, I used to feel like, as somebody touring through all parts of America, that I represented something safe to the women who I would sleep with or spend time with, because they didn't have to see me in class the next day. You know, if they were going out with some guy in the neighborhood, and they went to a concert with the guy and he expected something of them and they didn't want to put out, or they did, or whatever the situation was, it also had to carry over to the next day. So there's a mystery to touring, there's a mystery to musicians, yeah, all of that mystique was at its peak back then, and that undoubtedly is appealing. But people like me also represented somebody who would come and go, not ask them a lot of questions, and not challenge them, and allow them to find some of their own way, sexuality in life. You know, I mean, they were. You know, I think, and I don't think this will sound right, but I think I was being used as much as I was doing the using.
That's absolutely true.
You know, now moving forward, you know, because of the women's movement of the 60s and the 70s, doors opened for women to grow into roles, and careers began to open up for women in general. This probably more slowly than others, but nowadays, you know, we got union members at Local 1 that are women. We got lighting people, lighting techs. Some of the best lighting designers I know are women. Sarah Landau, one of my heroes. I hired her to work for me doing shows locally in New York about 10, 12 years ago. At the time, she was just a tech working for BML Lighting. Today, she's lighting some of the biggest bands in the world and has no home. When she's off the road, right now she's in Tasmania. When she's down off the road, she just travels the world, and then comes back to join whatever tour she needs to go on, whatever. She's a phenomenal LD. You know, there's a lot of, you know, I mentioned Susan Lee early on, as Todd Rundgren's tour manager. I don't know whatever became of her, but nowadays there's a lot of women tour managers.
Sure.
In fact, I was most recently replaced by a woman in a role in a tour that I left. In every capacity, not just the obvious women's roles, not just catering, not just running, not just secretarial or administrative assistants. Women have come a long, long way in the touring world and are an integral and equal, most importantly, an equal part, you know, on tour buses. You know, it's no longer, if there's a girl on the road, who's she sleeping with? It's irrelevant. You know, the touring road is full of enough drama, you know, regardless of sexuality. You know, the same thing can be said of enough guys nowadays. Now that people's sexuality is more open and people don't have to think about, well, you know, I like this guy and, you know, he and I are getting along. You know, you do what you want to do.
It's frowned upon these days.
Yeah,
it's really frowned
it
upon.
is kind of frowned upon, but it also doesn't have that. There was a time when it was like assumed that if you were a woman on the road, you were sleeping your way to the top.
Yeah, but the thing is, the culture is different. You know, I mean, it's like what was going on in the '60s and the early '70s, right? Was one thing. You know, as the culture changes, so do the morals and like,
Yeah.
you know, like the whole.
AIDS changed that a lot.
Oh yeah, that changed a lot of stuff. And it's also too when it went from being like a small industry to a really big, powerful industry.
Yeah.
This is where the frowned upon, you know, because everybody, it's like, you know, like if drugs and stuff like that. I mean, it used to be a part of, you know, the touring thing. You know, it was just a daily life. You know, and you smoke some pot, maybe do a bump here and there. Boom. Nowadays, you do a bump and someone hears it, you're gone.
Yeah.
You know, because there's too much money at stake, right? And women have made gigantic advances in both the backstage, you know, the technical end of things. There's plenty of women tour managers, plenty of women sound engineers, monitor engineers, lighting designers, costume designers, guitar techs. You know,
Kelly McCauley.
Like you know, and because
Shout out to
you know,
Kelly.
it changes the balance of your of your bus life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because you know, like the arts kind of follow each other. You know, when things got hot in film, you know, with the treatment of women and stuff like that, it goes down. It you know the other you know arts tend to follow along with it. That you know, like well, you know, we're not all idiots out there. You know, I mean, it may have seemed like that in the '60s, like we're a bunch of
Well, there was some truth to that.
Neanderthals. You know, it's like you know, it's like I'm pirating. You know, like, rape, pillage, take the gold. Doesn't work that way no more.
Yeah,
Not
I mean,
like that.
You know, in our world of storytelling here, both Bob and I, I'm sure, can tell lots of stories that focus on the groupie side of women. And
I want to say something I think is important. You burn out on that really fast.
true.
You know what I mean? Because it's something you said made a lot of sense. You know, because in a way, you know, you find yourself objectified in a way. They don't care who you are. You're just a guy who worked for a band, or you're a guy in a band, and it becomes kind of like you know, a notch in their belt or whatever. I banged this guy in a band. You know, and the same thing you said. They're like, you're gone. You know, you don't see you. You don't see you at Walmart. You know, don't see you in school the next day. Mom and dad never find out. Bang, zoom, you're gone, and you probably, you know, never see them again. But I mean, like, but that's way down, man. It doesn't happen like that anymore.
No.
You can't even get into shows unless you have it. You know what I'm saying? It and nobody wants to be in that position. Like he was saying, like if you get into a relationship with somebody on a tour, one of you is going to go.
Very probably
Because they
true.
think that your focus is wrong. You know, your focus is I've seen it as you know, like I've seen it within the last couple of months.
And to be fair, at the same time,
It's
there's
usually
a
the
number of
guy who
husband and
goes.
wife teams who tour together too.
Oh, it's true. True.
You know, a number of husband and wife teams that have done that. You know,
Rush.
yeah. You know, and I mean quite a few.
Craig Blazer.
Yeah. So
You should
I
talk
hope
to Craig.
we answered your question, but thank you for asking. Anybody else got more questions, or somebody pick a band, name a band, we'll tell you a story.
Oh, I don't know about that.
How about a little Bob Dylan?
Go ahead.
Well, should I tell the one about how my wife almost ran him over?
You told the one in our interview about the harmonica.
That's a sweet story. That's a very sweet story. Huh? Breaking the guitar. That was in the first podcast that I was a part of. But all right, I'll tell them both quickly. The breaking the guitar one. As we said earlier, I worked for Bob on the Rolling Thunder Review, and I did not know my ass from my elbow. We were up at a place in Cape Cod after the weeks of rehearsal at SIR in New York and doing our actual production rehearsals there. And we'd taken over a tennis court, and we had this entire hotel, this resort hotel in Cape Cod, except for a group of old ladies playing mahjong, some little mahjong tournament you know. And anyway, so the band had finished rehearsal, and there was something going on stage right. I was over on stage left, and the stage was just a tennis court. We weren't on an actual stage. And I go running across the stage, cardinal sin. You know, one thing you learn on the road, you don't run for anything. There's nothing that urgent, except if somebody's rushing your singer on the stage. You know, that's a different
Or he's
story.
on fire.
Or yeah, you know. Okay. Anyway, so I ran across the stage, and my right foot caught the guitar cable to Bob's brand new Telecaster on the music stand, and it just went boom, you know, straight flat down on this solid concrete floor that was the tennis court, indoor tennis court, and it crushed the toggle switch, and I'm like, oh God, I'm dead. Fortunately, his guitar tech was a very sweet guy. I still know today, Arthur Rosado, and he took care of that one for me. But the Harmonica Story was in 2009, I think it was. I was production manager at a venue in Canandaigua, New York, called CMAC, and Bob was playing, and they were doing a sound check, and earlier in the day, my son Sam was beginning to take an interest in drums, and George Rosselli, who's Bob's drummer, was showing Sam some rhythms to play on his kit. And later on, they're doing the sound check, and I'm standing by monitors, talking to his monitor engineer, the late Jules Ehret, and Bob comes over to ask Jules to find him a tape of a recording of a sound check piece they did like 5 days earlier that he wanted to listen to. So Jules was getting that, and Bob's waiting, and he gets the tape, and he says, "I'll dial it up for you." He says, "Thanks," and starts to walk back over to the center of the stage, and he turns around, takes the harmonica out of the clip, and goes, "That's for your son." So I got very excited. I gave the harmonica to Sam, and he goes, "Well, Dad, you probably care more about this than I do." So it still sits on the shelf in my office, but it's his harmonica. It's an F sharp for those of you who care.
Does anyone have any other questions? Real quick.
Oh yeah, tell us a Steven Tyler story. Larry wanted that earlier too.
Pick a decade. You want 70s, 80s? You want last week? All three?
I want to know.
Okay.
I want to know actually what it was like, you know, at the end of the '80s, early '90s, when they came back so huge.
I left. I was partly responsible because I put together the Aerosmith Run DMC thing by accident, of course. I ran into Rick Rubin at a record store, and I'd known he was like fresh out of NYU. He had just done like a Run DMC, and a friend of mine played on Rockbox, right? And like this had to be like, I don't know, 84-ish or something like that. And he told me, he goes, "You're still working with Aerosmith, right?" I go, yeah. He goes like, "Well, listen, let me tell you, I'm working with Run DMC." I go, yeah, Rockbox. Eddie Martinez played guitar on it. He goes, "Well, they've been using Walk This Way because they love the beat, right?" And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, "The funny thing is, it doesn't say Aerosmith on the front of the record, and because they carry things around in milk crates, the spine is worn down. So they think the name of that band is Toys in the Attic." So he goes like, "So I got this idea. We get a couple of the Aerosmith guys and we'll cut that song with them, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I could see that. I could see that." He goes, "Do you think he goes, "I reached out to them and I couldn't get past their management." And I'm like, "Wait, let me make this phone call. Hello, Joe. I got this project that someone's pitching to me right now." He goes, "Is there money involved?" I go, "Hey, Rick, is there money involved?" Yeah. So I had to really explain to Joe what hip hop was, because he lived in Boston, And don't take
Is
that the wrong
like
way.
a challenge thing?
Don't take
Oh,
that
he
the
lived in
wrong way.
Boston then.
You know, I mean, he was the guy. Listen, the guy was.
Well, you used to have listeners in Boston, didn't you?
Hey, wait a minute. No, come on. In like '84, it was like urban, Queens, Brooklyn thing. It just began to like spread and shit like that, right? So I kind of told them what it was, and wound up Joe and Steven came down, and they called me from the session. They go, "Yeah, we got to the studio," and it's like, these guys are all huddled around a table. We thought it was a drug thing. When he says, but they were like trying to sort out the Burger King, whose sandwich was whose, He goes, it was really kind of weird, but we had a good time, right? And it went to be a big hit, and it really jump-started their career. And
Led partly to them getting sober.
no, that's a little farther down the line. But the postscript to this is like, so I run into Ruben right out in L.A., and he goes like, he's going, man, you really kind of changed, music history by making that phone call. And I'm like, really? Do you really think so? I mean, just that? He goes like, yeah, and in a way, you're kind of responsible for new metal too, right? And I was like, do not hang Limp Bizkit on me.
Or Nickelback.
Right. Okay. So,
It was Faith No More.
well, Faith No More. Faith No More was not new metal.
No metal, not new metal.
Not at all.
No, but they used a lot of rap.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, like white kids with dreadlocks aping black music is not my idea of like, stepping forward. Sorry, that's my opinion.
It's
You
okay.
know?
Your opinion's worth it.
Let's go to the 70s with Aerosmith.
Okay.
1976 was the best year I ever had in this industry with them. And probably the best year ever because they went from being an opening act to a global band in a matter of months, from small theaters to stadiums, right? And everybody was happy. The band was happy. The crew was happy. Things were good for a solid year. For 1976 was such a great, happy time for everybody in that band, right? And everybody who worked for that band. And it was like they felt like they had, because in the early 70s, it was all about British bands. It wasn't towards the mid 70s, you have the rise of Boston, Kiss, Aerosmith, and that, before that, it was all about Rod Stewart and the Faces and the Rolling Stones, blah blah blah, Pink Floyd, blah blah blah, blah, Led Zeppelin, Five Nights, woo, and it was, so everybody was happy. Come 1977, happiness went away. Because it's hard to sing the blues when you're a fucking millionaire, I mean, it's like when the money kicks in, it's when the problems start with every band,
That's true.
They strive so hard to be successful. And they were like, when the money kicked in, they were like 25, 26 years old, I mean, it's like winning the lottery in a way. All of a sudden, instead of getting checks for $600, you're getting checks for $600,000, right? And all of a sudden, your perspective, the fact that you can go down and buy a Ferrari with, for cash.
Yeah. I remember in the late 80s working with their then manager, Tim Collins. And anyway, one of the things Tim would
Dr. Death.
Tim would complain to me about Stephen and Joe specifically because they, at that point in time, newly sober and newly on the road to recovering the riches they'd blown, kept thinking that they were worth more than the other three. And Tim's response was that, wait, so let me understand this. You think you and Joe should get more than Tom and Joey and Brad? Yeah. Well, I got a better idea. How about we just make more money for everybody? And they went along with that, which is...
As a postscript to that story.
That's why I figured there had to be, so come on with it.
In the video, for Run DMC Aerosmith Walk This Way, right? When they bust through, when they show Aerosmith playing,
Right.
they show Stephen and Joe. The other 3 people who were in the shadows were a New York City East Village band called Smash Gladys. Because they didn't have the money to fly the other 3 in. They're going like, we don't, they're going to be in the shadows anyway, so we just need a bass player, a drummer, and another, guy with big hair or something like that. So I know this band in the East Village, they'll do it for free, and so that's the bass player, drummer, and guitar player from Smash Gladys are the band in the shadows doing that.
How cool. Any other questions?
Now,
Any
wait,
other-
I'll
okay.
finish one
Sorry.
other thing. This is in the book, in the Aerosmith book. But there was a time when the other 3 were referred to as the LI3, which is the less interesting 3.
Less interesting.
It's true.
All right. Well,
Wow.
Yeah, those 2
Yeah.
guys, they could cause some trouble, the 2 of them,
Yeah.
I mean, there was some drama. There was some great, funny drama. It's funny now. It probably wasn't funny at the time.
No.
Real like,
Not if you're part of the LI3, it's not
well,
fucking
they
funny.
didn't care
right?
because even they were getting big checks.
Right.
It's like they were like, we don't care. It's like it's fine. If I can get 1 song on a record, I'm good. It's like, and to be honest, it's like the LI3. They never went bankrupt. I don't think they did actually. They were very careful about it. And I left when they went to co-writers and signed to Geffen and all that. They came out of rehab, and I referred to them as Stepford Smith, because they came out of a really deep rehab, and they were really different people. And if you know anything about people who come out of rehab, there's this thing called the pink cloud syndrome, because they've been making decisions under the influence of drugs, alcohol, whatever, for a long time, and now they're making decisions without being impaired in one way. So, and a lot of times they make the wrong decisions. So it's happened right now. Someone's fresh out of rehab, going like,
Sure.
okay, I think I'll marry this girl, right? Leading to much regret and big legal costs farther down the line. But in all honesty, I talk to those guys. I talk to Joe and Stephen all the time, because we got things going on. I had a very abrasive relationship with Stephen Tyler for 40 some odd years, and then we resolved that like 2 years ago, and now we're pals.
it's a good thing.
Yeah, I guess.
That's one of the things I find as we age through this business, is it's important to have good relationships
When you
with all
guys
those
like,
folks.
you gotta come stay at my house. I'm like, no way. Am I going to your house?
Unless he's not there.
Hey, listen, I've said that about Donald Fagen's house too. I'm like, no, I'm not going there. Sorry, because he lives in the house in Woodstock that Bob Dylan broke his neck at.
Right.
So I think that's like a bad juju house, So I'm not.
There's another story there. When I was doing Rolling Thunder Review, I went to Bobby Newworth, who was Bob's road manager of the 60s, and I said, so Bobby, what's the whole story on the broken neck? I mean, what actually happened? He said, broken neck? It's a load of crap. He got drunk and tripped over his motorcycle.
In that house.
At the house, right?
Any questions?
More questions,
2 seconds here.
Oh, go Larry.
Oh yeah, apparently if you use any
India
swear
and cursing
words
is the topic, because the gentleman did not use the
podcast-
microphone.
Yeah, if you use any swear words in your podcast, you will not get broadcast in India.
Well-
Which is a crazy thing, but it happens to be a huge market, so a lot of people will bleep out a curse word or something, to get.
Do you really think, Larry, there's somebody listening to every one of your podcasts?
Absolutely not.
I'm
I'm a very niche audience.
I know, but it's honestly, I think what you do is really important.
I appreciate
I really do, because you're documenting the stories of these people. And you provide like a. I didn't have that to go to when I was starting out.
No.
There were no books. There were no schools.
No.
At least here you can hear people. You go like, I respect this guy's work, and then you listen to an interview with you, and you realize that he started out the same way that you did. It's like I always like to go to Robert Scofield when he hooked up 8 monitors together and blew up some power amp, and he thought that was the end of his career, right? And I was like, I did that. I blew up a whole PA. It caught on fire.
And I just want to
And
say,
still kept my job.
yeah, right. I just want to say to the woman that asked about women in the industry, I make it a point to have as many women on the show as possible, and I've had some amazing women. Like Carrie Kais, who's been Pearl Jam's monitor tech since the '90s. Like, she's been there since the beginning, basically. Who paved the way? Who started an organization called SoundGirls.org that seeks to empower and train women in the industry. And so, not to plug the show, but there's a lot of great women on there to check out if you're interested and hear their stories. And they're the same. And while a lot of doors have opened, a lot of women are still kicking those doors open and still. There are a lot of women that I've had on the show that I follow on Facebook, and they post they're hilarious stories, but they're rooted in some real crappy days of taking a lot of shit from guys they're just rooted in their own shit that don't see room for women in this or whatever. So they're rooted in their ways, right? And they have to fight against that prejudice every day. But there's been a lot of opportunity, and it's awesome. It's awesome to see.
I have another question, I think. Mark?
Yeah. Do you have anything interesting to say about Steely Dan? I just always thought they were just such a unique band, and they did their own thing.
Starting with, I think we both agree we both miss Walter Becker tremendously. Yeah. We talk about Bob being crabby.
Oh, wow. Walter, that's crabby. He made me look like nothing.
Walter was kept you on your toes, and not in a nice way necessarily. Some people, but I mean,
well, maybe you.
No. He was hard on me too. But,
he was very hard on you.
But
he wouldn't call you tour manager.
Well, no, he kept asking me who was the tour manager. But that was also because in the hierarchy that was Steely Dan, with both of them going, they each had their own road manager,
right? And
there was a tour manager, and
let's just put it this way: that neither one of them liked figures of authority in any way, shape, or form. So, and they're both really smart guys.
Yes.
And really sarcastic, and I would also say one of them understood that nobody cares about new music from them, so there would never be another Steely Dan record, right? Because the fact was really funny. They go like, no one will give us the budget to make the kind of record that we need to make a record. It's like everybody we know at Warner Brothers is dead. It's like it's all it's like it's all it's a whole different generation of record company people who are looking for singing, dancing 16-year-olds now, and they go like, oh, Steely Dan, have them send some demos.
But
maybe we'll
to
give
be
them a little budget or something.
To be more anecdotal about it, one of the things Walter loved to do, and Bob can pick this up because Bob was for 11 years Walter's road manager, but I was only there for about 2 years, and it was a pretty remarkable deuce. But one of the things Walter liked to do after a sound check, firstly he would stay on stage and just keep playing, and we had opening acts that we had to set up, and we couldn't set them up until he decided he was done. And if I dared to say, "Hey, Walter, we really need to move this along," he'd go, "Why? It's costing money? Don't give a fuck." There, I said it.
There goes the Far East.
Yeah. And he would play until he was good and ready to leave the stage. Then he would take Bob, and they would leave the venue and go visit local artisanal guitar guys or music stores, and sometimes spend upwards of $10,000 on vintage gear that we'd bring back to the show.
It would ride on his bus.
Well, he would put it, but they'd put it in Walter's dressing room, and then instead of taking a nap or getting rested up for the show or even having dinner, Walter would play around with his new toys. Now, first band would go on, the show would be proceeding, we'd be in set change, and we're right on time, and everything's going smoothly, and the band are ready to get on stage. Donald was ready to get on stage, and Walter's still sitting in his dressing room playing with this amp. And it's like, okay, say we're supposed to be on stage at 10 after 9. Walter would go at 10 after 9 and go, I think I want to use this amp tonight. and I'd have to send the crew guys over, get that amp, bring it down on stage, power it up, mic it up, get it line checked, which again is not a simple process as just throw it on the stage and go. Especially for Steely Dan, where sound is everything, and then when that was ready, we'd go back to Walter, and he says, "Okay, I'll be there." And again, my job was protecting the money, part of it. So I'm
like to wind Rich up.
Yeah.
It was like, I go, hey man, you need to go on stage. He goes, you can't make me. Which was true.
And Bob had 11 years. I had 2. So I'm not about to go, Walter, get your fucking ass out of the dressing room and onto the deck.
I would go they play for about 7 minutes before you come out. I mean, should I get them started? And you can just show up whenever you want. He goes like, I don't know. I go, Rich is starting to sweat. He went, good. Needless to say, Steely Dan. I never mixed Steely Dan because when they hired me, I said, "Oh, I'd love to mix this band. I think I'd do a really good job." They go, "Well, we have a much better job for you." Right? And I was like, "Okay," and they go, "You'll travel with us. You'll have incredible power. Nobody will question anything you do." Right? And I was like, "Really?" And they go, yeah, we want a pony in the dressing room. So we got him a pony. And they were like, we had no idea a pony would smell this bad.
And then there was the daily 5 pounds of Washington State cherries.
Oh, the cherry. Yeah, there was a thing about
even
cherries.
out of season.
Get me the cherries. They must be organic. And, there was some, they had a good time. They enjoyed it. They enjoyed playing. They eccentric, yes, right. A lot of fun, yes. They liked me because we grew up within 3 miles of each other, and we're about Becker was like 6 months younger than me. Fagan's a year older than me, so you could go like, did you ever go to the Garrick Theater and see the Mothers? And I'm like, yes. I did. And they go, okay, right. How about Jethro Tull? How do you feel about Jethro Tull? And I was like, I think that's a loaded question. I'm going to take the 5th. Right? Right. And like Becker says to me, he goes, I think the best New York band was the Youngbloods. And I was like, I'm taking the 5th. I only saw them play
I
once.
might have agreed with him on that.
What?
I might have agreed with him on that.
I mean, he listed up all these reasons too. He said incredible rhythm section, and he was a deep jazz guy, and then I found out he was a closet Who fan, which was even weirder. I was like, he comes over, he calls, he goes, come over to the suite. I go over and he's watching the Who live at the Isle of Wight, and he's like, that guitar sound. I go, yeah, it's a high watt on 10. And he goes like, let's get one tomorrow. It's true. No, he was like, I like the Who up to Tommy. And I was like, yeah, I could see that. I could, you listen to those songs and those lyrics and stuff like that. I could see why he liked it. You know? But they were, they were pretty deep into the jazz thing too. He loved
Donald especially on that.
Yeah, he was a horn guy. He hated guitars.
Yeah.
Right? I did a solo tour with him, right? And I brought a guitar with me, and like, it was like, he's sitting there going, I hate Boz Scaggs. He plays guitar. I took the guitar and I put it underneath the bunk. Right? I was like, I'm just not even gonna see, let him see this.
Anybody else want to throw out any more names before we have to wrap this up?
An Iggy Pop story?
That would be him.
All right.
Bring us home, Bob. Bring us home.
Yeah.
Okay, I did these Max's Kansas City shows, right? That through the period of time became known as the Blood Show, or like that there are people that he cut himself with glass on stage, right? Which was not true, right? And what happened was he went to walk out on some tables, right? And he slipped and he fell on a stem glass, right? And put a puncture in his two punctures in his chest, right? I was working the side of the stage. They had a guy who mixed them. I was like taking care, dodging mic stands and trying to fix broken pedals and shit like that. So he comes over to me and he goes like, "Put a piece of tape on that. I seem to be bleeding." Right, and I'm like, okay, and like then he comes back and he goes, "The tape fell off. Can you get a bigger piece of tape?" Right, and I'm like, "I think you need to stop this show, because I don't think a bigger piece of tape is going to stop that." Right, and he goes like, "I'm a professional. I will finish this show." He went out there and he would do this. He would turn towards me and he'd go like this with his arm and he'd shoot blood at me. Right. This is absolutely true. Right. So like a million years later, right? I did this interview for the book "Please Kill Me," and they want to know about the Blood Show, right? And I was like, "Yeah, he fell on a glass, right?" And so Pop comes to see me and he goes, "You had to tell the truth." I go like, honestly, man. It goes like, I think it's a better story than you cutting yourself with a piece of glass. I mean, like, I go, if you look at the photographs, they're puncture wounds. I mean, like you fell, and like there's plenty of people who are in the first row who go, "Oh yeah, he fell on my wine glass," and it was really bad. But all in all, he was that band and could produce a fury on stage, unlike any band that I'd seen at that time, or there's very few bands that can produce the kind of energy and fury that band could, because they were a band in a tailspin. They were on their way out. I mean, there was no record label, there was no tour support. They were using stolen gear. They were fighting for their lives. It's the truth. They were fighting for their lives to survive, and they only survived about another 6 months. After that, to this day, I still do. I do projects with James Williamson. The guitar player on Raw Power. Right. I've done some stuff with Pop, and unfortunately, both Ashton brothers have passed away. I did their tribute to Ron Ashton in Ann Arbor, where all the Living Stooges played, and Dennis Tech from Radio Birdman played, and they did some songs from the first and second record with an orchestra. Stooges with an orchestra. Think about that, right? It was like, you should have seen the look on their face, right? Because they rehearsed without him, right? And we had a stunt singer who sang the songs, and we had plexiglass, and they wanted the plexiglass out, and I was like, "Oh no, you're going to need that." They're like, "We don't like that. You got to take it away." And I'm like, as soon as he came out, the first thing he did was throw a mic stand at him. I'm like, "Oh, I know how that feels." Right? It was like, and they did a great job, and it's on a DVD somewhere, and it was very, very interesting. It's way better to watch than that crappy "Gimme Danger" documentary that Jarmusch did, which is very one-sided. So there.
Folks, thank you very, very much. Thank you to Rich.
One last thing I want to do.
Yes.
Listen, guys, I think I've had a pretty cool life. I've done a lot of stuff I'm very proud of. I've seen a lot of things. I've been a lot of places. I've worked with some cool bands. I've been privy to some phenomenal moments in music and in life, and I'm very grateful for all of that. But at the outset of this thing this evening, introducing us, Larry, referred to me as, Rich, and to Bob as the legendary guy. And I have to say, like I said, I think I'm cool, but I am never in my entire life going to be this cool.
Thanks, Rich.
Nite Bob audio.
Wait, I gotta tell you something. I got this guy into a New York Doll show in Cleveland, like in 1974.
That's how we met.
With Kiss as the opening act. So it's like, be careful what what kind of energy you put out there, because it was like 24 years later, it was like 14 years later. We're on this tour, and I go, "What's it like tour managing Kiss?" And he goes, "They don't need a tour manager. They need a secretary. They're driving me mad," right? And I was like, well, there you go. But thanks a lot. No, I mean, it's like in the touring industry, you do build relationships with people and their shared experiences, and it's like, I know a lot of these people I still talk to. I talk to people that I toured with in Aerosmith in '76 once a week. I talk to him every other day. I talk to Larry. I mean, I know Larry a year or two now. And we just keep pushing on, and it's like, I tell people that if you want to go the distance and do this kind of thing, more power to you, but it's a difficult road, I mean, it's like, especially now, right? Because individuality is kind of like people don't look for that. It's kind of like everybody's like the Minions, It's like a million bald guys with beard and black shorts, It's kind of weird.
Passes hanging from their characters.
I'm old, I mean, it's like, come on, man. I'm in my late 60s, right? You sound like Grandpa in the news. You all look the same.
Thank you all for coming out.
Thanks for coming. I really
Very,
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Also, thank you, Larry, for giving us all a forum in Roadie Free Radio.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. As you head home tonight, keep in your thoughts John Lennon. Today's December 8th.
And Dimebag Darrell.
Dimebag Darrell.
And
And Jim Morrison's birthday.
yeah,
Don't
all-
forget
all-
the Lizard King.
All things to celebrate.
It's a positive thing to put on top of
Right. Right. We go Jim Morrison's birthday. And on that note, you guys drive safe, be good people. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for joining us.
No roadies, no rock and roll.